I want to extend a huge welcome to all of the virtual members of Columbine United Church, those of you who are literally joining us from across the United States. It is great to have you here. You know, this past week I had a conversation with somebody out in the community, somebody who was not affiliated with this church, and we struck up a conversation, and they told me that they had left the Christian church. They had stopped following Jesus, and they were wandering, and they were looking for something that was something that they could believe in, something that they could participate in. So I started telling them about what I believed and then about what we believed. And they were flabbergasted. They said, "Are you really a minister?" Yeah. And they said, "Are you really a church?" I said, "Yes, I'm really a minister. Yes, we're really a church." She said, "I think I found my new church home." I said, "Yes, I think you have." Now here's the crime. She didn't know a church like this existed. All of us. This can no longer be, that people are out there wandering and do not have a place that they can call a church home because they don't know a place like this exists. We have got to stop being the best kept secret in Littleton, in the metropolitan area, and in the United States. And that's why I'm glad that you are here, because I want you to do more than just watch this service. I want you to like it. I want you to copy the URL and put it on your Facebook page. Start getting the word out, because there are other people in your community and literally around the world who are looking for a place like this. Welcome. It is great to have you here. You know, it is an honor to have Governor Hickenlooper here, and I just want to say a few things before I bring him up. First of all, I want to have Roxanne stand up. Roxanne is his chief of staff. Let's give Roxanne a huge round of applause. Because it takes someone like Roxanne to keep the governor kind of going in the right direction, so bless you, bless you. You know, many people have asked, why are we having the governor come to Columbine United Church? Well, it was about 7 or 8 years ago when you were the mayor of Denver that you came to speak to us about the homeless initiative. And so when I thought we were doing this whole thing on servant leadership, I thought it'd be a really good thing to have the governor come to talk with us about what it means to be a servant leader. But really, what I'm really trying to do is I'm reserving the spot for when it's President Hickenlooper and he swings back through that. There we have. You say, no, no. The governor and I became acquainted with one another at the Claire Davis Memorial Service. One of the hard things about all of us was that there had to be a Claire Davis Memorial Service. I think that we were all shocked that yet again we had a school shooting over in our area. But the most profound thing for me was that immediately there was somebody who was at their bedside, at Claire's bedside, and at Claire's parents' bedside, and that was John Hickenlooper. He was there because he cared. He was the governor, but I think it was more than just the governor that brought him to their bedside. Because he cares about people. And despite what your political beliefs are, set those aside. That's not why he's here today. He's here today because he's always been an inspiration for me about what it means to be a servant leader, leading out of a desire to serve people. So when we put together this whole Lenten sermon series on I Am Third, my God is first, my friends are second, and I am third, which I took from Michael Davis, Claire's dad, because this is how he raised Claire, on being a servant. And so I thought to myself, what a perfect thing to invite the governor to come. Thank you, Roxanne, for helping us make this happen. Governor Hickenlooper, please come.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that very much, your kind invitation. I appreciate the warmth I feel here. And I want to recognize Roxanne also. There's not another chief of staff, I think, anywhere in the country who is as accomplished and as talented as Roxanne. But beyond all that, and she knows more about how to manage a complex enterprise and motivate employees and create culture. But even though her undergraduate degree was in social work and she's read all these business books, when she got her graduate degree, it wasn't a master's in business administration. She's got a master's in divinity. And sometimes she says, I'm a God person, and it makes a huge difference to have someone like that helping run the state. Anytime anyone invites you, into their home, for me it's always a huge honor. I mean, that someone has chosen to bring you into their lives, into their family, into their sanctuary. And today this is especially true for me. I'm deeply honored to be invited into your home, into your place of worship. It's an honor in the purest sense of that word. I'm also honored, and I think maybe a little bit overwhelmed that Reverend Poos-Benson has asked me to talk on this theme of I am third, a simple and yet very profound phrase that reminds all of us that we're here to serve, that's our highest form of existence, and this term of servant leadership. And it seems natural to begin with how I first came to know Reverend Poos-Benson late last year, as he mentioned. We met at the memorial service for Clara Davis, which had been organized by her parents, Michael and Desiree. And of course, this was a time of intense sadness. Michael and Desiree had lost their daughter, Claire. This mother and father had endured a level of grief, the sort of loss that I don't think many of us can't really comprehend. But for many of us, and for me, I know, it also became a moment of inspiration. I think that the fact that in that moment of their own suffering, Michael and Desiree reminded us that there was another family suffering, the Pearson family. They were also enduring their own heartbreak, their unique heartbreak, and have suffered the loss of their son, Carl. And it was a time when Michael and Desiree showed amazing mercy and grace. I mean, here we all were trying to tend to their needs, and what we found was that they were tending to ours. In that moment, just by the example of their strength, their enduring love, I think Michael and Desiree Davis showed us really what servant leadership is, what it really means. They put themselves and their own needs, which were great, second to the needs of their friends and the needs of their community. Not only that, but by their actions, by organizing that incredible memorial, they reached out and they helped, they ministered to so many thousands of people that didn't know them, but in their minds and spirit had gathered around them. And I think at that time, and for me ever since, every time I've heard them, Michael and Desiree always talk about how grateful they were for our support, but that you must not forget the extended family, these others that are also suffering. I think that when you're going through that kind of grief, that gift is awesome. I think Michael and Desiree, through their love and their leadership, are clearly the examples, not just because that Michael described the phrase, but their life and their actions are examples of why we're all gathered here together. I grew up in a sad household. I don't often talk about it, but my mother's first husband died at the end of World War II. She had 2 kids. She met my dad, who was this wonderful extroverted storyteller, very animated, worked in a steel fabricating plant, much beloved, loved telling jokes and stories and making fun of himself and others. And she had 2 more kids. I'm the baby. And when I was about 5, he got cancer. He had intestinal cancer. They didn't catch it early. And he had 3 major operations. And in the end, he was bedridden for about 5 months at home. And my mother constantly tended to my father. And during those last days when he was bedridden, he had infections that had come up throughout his body. And he was in a great deal of pain. And so my mother was always tending to my father and generally rarely would leave his side. When I was a kid, I guess I want to say I was a kid, and narcissistic and really thinking mostly of myself. And I had this school play. We'd just moved to a new neighborhood. My father wanted to make sure we lived in a slightly better neighborhood. So this public school had a play where I was to play, and I was, 7 years old. I was to play the professor. And it was a series of vignettes that would connect American history, and all the other kids got to play. And I was the kind of person that linked each of these vignettes together. I think I perhaps had a time machine, I'm not sure. And there were 2 performances, and I desperately wanted my mother to see this moment. Let me just say, this was the only performance of my entire academic career. And it was only for 2 nights, and she was going to come on the second night. And the second night, my father was in a great deal of pain, and she couldn't come. And I remember this night vividly. I came back from the play, and I was standing on the landing and screaming at my mother, why don't you ever come to my stuff? And my brother, who was 7 years older, came, our bedrooms were separated by a little bathroom, and I was standing on the landing, and he just kind of came out and picked me up. My brother was 4 years an undefeated wrestler. and he picked me up, swung me into my room, and he held me just almost against the wall, but gave me one good shake. And he said, he looked at me and he said, what are you thinking? He said, how do you think that makes Mom feel? You think she doesn't want to be at the play? She said, don't you think she and Hick, Sydney and Betsy, the 2 older kids, were already old enough. Everybody called my dad Hick. A lot of people call me Hick. But my brother said, don't you think that she wants herself and Hick to be at the play? And it was the first time I understood, really got it, that it wasn't all about me. So at this time also, one of the things my mother had, she had many tasks with 4 kids and a very sick husband. Each night, my father he had these infections, so he would get a fever would come and take him, and then he would wake up in what my mom called a cold sweat. So all of a sudden he'd be cold and chill, but the sheets would be soaking wet. So she would roll him over halfway, take the sheet up, put a new sheet down, roll him back on the clean sheet, take the old sheet up. She'd do that 2 or 3 times a night. And can you imagine with 4 kids, that's a lot of sheets. And we had a friend, she had a friend, we all had a friend named Agnes Nixon. And some of you might recognize the name. She lived about a few miles from us, and she'd met my mother through a mutual friend right when she was having kids and my mother was having kids. And Agnes Nixon started out as a kind of just writing scenes for radio plays, and then ended up writing for TV soap operas, right, when they first began in the early 1950s. And so she created the characters and wrote the stories for, The Guiding Light, As the World Turns, All My Children she created. And she was one of these people that she stayed in the same house as she became, remember when Barbara Walters made $1 million a year? Agnes Nixon made $1 million a year before Barbara Walters. And Agnes, no one asked Agnes, but she heard about the sheets. And so she arranged to have a linen service come and deliver 4 sets of sheets every day. And, she wasn't asked, she didn't. She always would joke about it, But my mother said it was the greatest gift anyone ever gave her. Because what it did was allow my mother to have more time with my father. And I think it was such a, I knew I was going to get a little emotional, but I had a night last night, I didn't sleep as much as I normally do, so I might get a little too emotional. And I beg your indulgence, but, Agnes, she didn't ask what she could do. She just was paying attention. And she saw a need and she acted. Again, what an incredibly kind act of love. But she was, without even realizing it, demonstrating servant leadership. And again, that was happening just as I was kind of coming out of this narcissistic shell. Trust me, I stayed in it for most of the time for more years. But always at Christmas or birthdays when gifts were exchanged, my mother would always refer to this as the greatest gift she ever got. And so at a time when my brother had kind of held me against the wall, given me that good shake, shaken me literally into realizing that, life wasn't all about me, but life was really about how you care for others. And her empathy and action were examples to me, and I think her love showed that kind of leadership. Too often in public service, the public service part of public service is forgotten. It gets lost. And how often do you hear an elected official actually get to talk about love, or more importantly, be able to demonstrate love? Public service, I think, true, pure public service is looking for those opportunities to provide linen service, right? It's not about getting in the way or childishly saying, what about me, or, I'm right, you're wrong. At its best, it's rooted in love. I think at that time last year when I first met Reverend Poos-Benson, and when I met Michael and Claire Davis, our state had been through a lot. Politics had become very divisive. We'd had multiple fires, droughts, senseless violence, a devastating flood. And I'd been to countless funerals, and I'd visited countless people who'd lost someone very close to them, very dear to them. And I kept trying to make sense of it all. Why? I'd visited people that had lost their homes and every possession, every photograph. I tried to be there for them, whatever that means, and I think everyone in this room knows oftentimes that you don't know what you can do. But I thought about why, again and again. What was God up to here? And when at a certain point, and upon reflection, I started to understand that what was remarkable in each of these tragedies was that so often those who were most affected, the people who had endured the greatest loss, or who had gone to and tried to be of help to, the incredible thing was they were the strong ones, right? They were the ones who showed mercy and resolve and resilience and love. And incredibly, I'd go to their side to try and be of service, and yet they were the ones trying to help me many times. They wanted to know how they could be of service. So many people from all over the state wanted to be of help and to be of service. And after each and every tragedy, people in every corner of the state reached out and either offered time or resources. They wanted to lend a hand. They wanted to be there for those who'd lost so much. In their own way, they wanted to provide linen service. And humans really are remarkable. We were created with this remarkable capacity to love, to think beyond ourselves. I think one of the lessons that I learned, or I guess really was reminded of, is that sometimes when we are shaken by events, we're reminded that to reach out to love is also a form of leadership. And maybe the trick would be for us to be that way all the time. To surround ourselves within communities like this one, to have people in their lives, like our chief of staff at the state, who sometimes while we get caught up in our lives and the cabinets, maybe going off on a tangent, give us a shake, like my brother did, and, remind us to think about and understand how that's going to affect others. What I learned from my mother and from Agnes Nixon is that servant leadership really, in a way, is the only kind of leadership. It's the only true form of leadership. Thank you so much for having me here. And if you ever think that I need a shake, please feel free to give it. Thank you.
Please pray with me this morning. God, in Jesus Christ, you come to us, and often we enter into sanctuary believing that we are here to worship, and yet you remind us over and over again that you came to serve us, that you came to provide us linen service, so that we can go out into the world and make this a better place by doing so for others. God, remind us over and over again that our worship and our faith and our beliefs and our place in this world is really one of going and finding people to serve. Finding the people in our lives, the people around us that we might not even notice, who need sheets, who need a little thing on the side to provide them time with someone, provides them the time to care for their kids, or care for a spouse, care for a parent. To provides them the time that they need to take a moment away from whatever illness is going on in their life, whatever tragedy they have encountered. God, may we be the kind of community, kind of people who go out into the world today and serve, who go out and love, who find our own ways to express public service and realize that it's not all about me. It's not all about us. God, all along you've been teaching us that heaven comes to earth, but that it comes in these small little actions. And we're reminded of that because of a prayer that you've taught us. And we lift up that prayer now saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.